Her parents gave her away as a maid to settle a debt. But the widowed mountain man she was sold to gave her something far more dangerous: his heart. Imagine, if you can, the sheer terror of being 19 years old, standing in the kitchen of the home you've known all your life, and realizing that the hushed whispers of your parents aren't about the harsh winter or the failing crops. They are about you. When Elara Vance discovered that her family had bartered her future to pay for their mistakes, she thought her life was over. She was sent to the remote, formidable homestead of Silas Thorne, a man known throughout the Colorado Territory as a recluse, a ghost of the mountains, a man whose very name was used to frighten children into obedience. But what Elara didn't know, what no one in the settlement knew, was that beneath Silas Thorne's hardened exterior lay a soul shattered by grief, waiting for a light to guide it home. In the echoing halls of his lonely timber mansion, amidst the forbidden whispers of a love that defied every law of the frontier, a story of redemption was about to unfold. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Frontier Rescue Stories. I'm your host, and today we are journeying deep into the Rockies for a tale of sacrifice, forbidden romance, and the enduring power of love. Before we step into the snow, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a journey into the past. Help us keep these stories alive. And I want to know, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. I love seeing how far our campfire reaches. Now let's head to Bear Creek, 1867. The breakfast at the modest Vance cabin proceeded in a tense, suffocating silence. That Wednesday morning in March, 1867. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and wood smoke. But there was an undercurrent of something else: fear. Elara Vance sat at the rough-hewn table, watching her father, Jacob, stare into his tin cup as if the answers to his prayers were floating in the dark, weak liquid. Her mother, Sarah, wouldn't even sit. She bustled around the cast-iron stove, wiping a clean spot on the range over and over again, with a rag that had seen better days. Her movements were jerky, nervous, like a bird sensing a storm. Elara's younger siblings, Caleb, who was 12, and little Ruthie, just 8, were unusually quiet, chewing on their dense cornbread with wide, anxious eyes. "Elara," Jacob said finally. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding under a boot heel. "We need to speak." Elara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She was 19, old enough to know that when her father used that tone, the news was never good. She set down her pewter spoon, the metal clinking softly against the wood. "Is it the trapping lines, Pa?" "The lines are empty," Jacob admitted, not looking at her. "The floods last month. The sudden thaw took everything. The traps, the pelts we'd stored in the lower shed. It's all gone, Elara, ruined. We're up the spout." She knew this. Everyone in the valley knew the snowmelt had been brutal this year. The creeks had swelled into raging torrents, washing away months of labor in a single night. "We can replant," she said, trying to sound hopeful, though she knew the season was late. "The ground is thawing. We can put in corn." "We have no seed," Sarah said from the stove, her voice cracking. She turned, and Elara saw that her eyes were rimmed with red, swollen from crying in the dark. "And Mr. Thorne, he holds the note on the land. He came by yesterday while you were at the creek." Silas Thorne. The name seemed to lower the temperature in the room instantly. Thorne was the wealthiest man in the territory, a legend who controlled the Bear Creek Valley. He was a fur baron turned cattleman, a man who lived alone in a sprawling homestead high on the ridge. People said he was fair but exacting, a man of stone, much like the mountains he conquered. He was a man who didn't tolerate fools or failure. "He wants his money," Jacob said, his voice barely a whisper. "And we don't have it. With the interest, it's near 20% now." "So we lose the cabin?" Elara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We lose everything?" "No," Jacob whispered, his shame palpable. "We made an arrangement." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Elara looked from her father to her mother, panic rising in her throat. "What kind of arrangement?" "He needs help," Sarah blurted out, wringing her hands in her apron. "Since his wife passed 4 years ago, that big house of his has gone to ruin. He needs a housekeeper, someone to cook, to clean, to manage the place. He's gone through 3 in the last year." Elara felt the blood drain from her face. "You want me to work for him? For wages? To pay the note?" "Not for wages, girl," Jacob said, finally meeting her eyes. The misery in them was unbearable. "For the debt. 2 years. You work for Silas Thorne for 2 years, and he marks the note paid in full. The land stays ours. The room spun. 2 years. It wasn't a job. It was an indenture, a sentence. You sold me, she whispered. The words hung in the air, ugly and true. We didn't sell you, her mother cried, rushing to the table to grasp Elara's cold hand. It's honest work, Elara. You'll have a warm room, good food, better than we can give you here. Look at us, we're starving, and you'll be saving your family. If we lose this place, we have nowhere to go. Caleb and Ruthie, they'll starve. Elara looked at her little sister, who was clutching her corn-husk doll, terrified by the shouting. She looked at the walls of the cabin, lined with moss to keep out the wind. This was her home. These were her people, and they had traded her labor like a sack of flour to save themselves. He's a stranger, Elara said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and despair. A recluse. They say he hasn't spoken a kind word to a soul in 5 years. They say he's dangerous. He is a man of his word, Jacob insisted, though he looked like he might be sick. He won't harm you. He just wants his house kept. It's strictly business. Before Elara could argue, the sound of hoofbeats thundered in the yard. Heavy, deliberate hooves on the frozen mud. He sent his man, Jacob said, standing up quickly, knocking his knee against the table. Elias, he's here to take you. Now? Elara stood up, knocking her chair back. You mean right now? Best not to keep him waiting, her father mumbled, moving to the door. Elara felt a hot tear slide down her cheek, but she angrily wiped it away. She wouldn't cry. Not for them, not now. She went to the small corner of the loft she shared with Ruthie and packed her belongings. It didn't take long. Her possessions fit in a single bundle: 2 calico dresses, faded from washing, a spare pair of stockings, her grandmother's Bible, and a small battered book of poetry she had traded a basket of eggs for last summer. When she came down, a man was standing in the doorway. He was tall, with dark skin and hair braided neatly down his back. Elias Moon, Thorne's foreman and right hand. He was Arapaho, a man who walked between the worlds of the tribe and the settlers with a quiet, formidable dignity. His name, she knew, was actually Tisto, meaning strikes on top, but the settlers called him Elias. Miss Vance, Elias said. His voice was low and respectful, but there was no room for argument in it. The wagon is ready. Elara looked at her parents one last time. Her mother was weeping into her hands. Her father was staring at the floor, unable to witness the price of his survival. 2 years, Elara said coldly. And then I come back. But I won't ever forget that you didn't ask me. She walked out the door, past the woodpile she had stacked, past the garden patch she had turned, and climbed onto the seat of the buckboard wagon. She didn't look back as Elias snapped the reins. She kept her eyes fixed on the jagged peaks of the Rockies ahead. Somewhere up there, in the shadow of the pines, her prison awaited. The journey up the mountain took 4 grueling hours. The road was little more than a scarred track through the wilderness, winding through dense forests of ponderosa pine and aspen. As they climbed, the air grew thinner and colder, biting at Elara's cheeks. The wagon bucked over ruts and stones, the suspension groaning in protest. Elias was not a talkative man, but he wasn't unkind. He offered her a heavy wool blanket when the wind picked up, his movements efficient and silent. Tell me, Elara said after miles of silence, her curiosity warring with her dread. Mr. Thorne, is he as terrible as they say? Elias glanced at her sideways, his dark eyes unreadable. People talk to fill the silence, miss. Mr. Thorne is a hard man, yes. Grief does that to a man. It turns him into stone. But he is fair. Do your work, respect the house, and you'll have no trouble. Just don't pry. Grief? Elara asked. His wife? Rebecca, Elias nodded. She died 4 years ago. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. Since then, the house is quiet. Too quiet. He holds the silence like a shield. They crested a ridge, and suddenly the homestead lay before them. It was breathtaking. The main house was a massive 2-story structure built of dark, seasoned logs and local stone, far grander than any cabin in the settlement. It had a wide porch wrapping around the front, supported by thick timber columns. Smoke curled lazily from 2 massive stone chimneys. Around it lay a kingdom, a massive barn, stables, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and a garden that looked like it had once been beautiful but was now overgrown, with weeds and brambles. Stone Ridge, Elias announced. As they pulled up to the main house, a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was older, stout, with a face that looked like it had been carved from an apple that had dried in the sun. This was Matilda, the head housekeeper, a woman who wore her authority like armor. "You're late," Matilda said sharply as Elara climbed down, her legs stiff from the ride. She looked Elara up and down, noting the worn boots and the simple calico dress. "You're young. Can you work? Or are you one of those town girls who faints at the sight of a washboard?" "I can work," Elara said, lifting her chin. "I've run a household since I was 12. I can cook, clean, sew, and tend a garden." "We'll see," Matilda huffed. "Grab your things. I'll show you to your room. Mr. Thorne is out on the range checking the herd. He'll deal with you at dinner." The interior of the house was shocking. Elara had never seen such wealth. The floors were polished oak, covered in intricate Persian rugs that muffled their footsteps. There were paintings on the walls, oils of landscapes she didn't recognize, likely from the east, but everything was covered in a thin film of dust, and the heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the spring sun. It felt like a tomb, a wealthy, beautiful tomb. Matilda led her to a small, neat room on the second floor. It was sparse but clean. "This is yours. Uniform is in the wardrobe, navy cotton, white apron. Dinner is at 6 sharp. You serve him, you don't speak unless spoken to, and you never ever disturb him in the library. That is his sanctuary. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Elara said. "And one more thing," Matilda added, her voice dropping. "Don't expect him to be grateful. He pays for a service, he expects it done. He's not looking for a friend." Elara changed into the crisp navy dress and white apron provided for her. It fit perfectly, which made her wonder who had worn it before. She spent the afternoon peeling potatoes in the cavernous kitchen, listening to the gossip of the other staff, mostly ranch hands who came in for coffee. They spoke of Thorne with a mix of respect and fear, calling him the Bear of the Ridge. At 6 o'clock, the heavy front door opened. The temperature in the house seemed to drop. Silas Thorne walked in. He was a giant of a man, over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that filled the hallway. He wore a canvas coat dusted with snow and mud, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. When he took it off, Elara saw a face that was rugged and handsome but etched with deep, weary lines. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes were the color of stormy skies, blue-gray and piercing. He hung his coat and turned. Spotting Elara standing by the dining room door with a pitcher of water, he stopped dead. "Who are you?" His voice was deep, resonating in her chest like a bass note. Elara curtsied, her legs shaking. "Elara Vance, sir. My father sent me." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Ah, the payment." He said the word with such disdain that Elara flinched. He walked past her into the dining room, sitting at the head of the long, empty mahogany table. Elara hurried to serve him the stew, a rich venison broth. Her hands trembled as she ladled it into his bowl. A single drop splashed onto the polished wood. Thorne looked at the spot, then up at her. Elara froze, expecting a shout. "You're shaking," he said quietly. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, reaching for her apron to wipe the spot. "I'm not usually so clumsy." "Leave it," he commanded. He picked up his spoon. "I am not an ogre, Miss Vance. I do not eat clumsy girls for supper, but I expect competence. If you are to be here for 2 years, you will learn to steady your hands." "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Can you read?" he asked suddenly, not looking up from his stew. "Yes, sir." "Right?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Then you can make yourself useful with the inventory ledgers in the mornings. Matilda can't read a lick, and my accounts are a mess. Now leave me." Elara fled to the kitchen, her heart pounding. He was cold, yes, dismissive, but he hadn't yelled. As she washed the dishes that night, plunging her hands into the hot, soapy water, she thought of his eyes. They weren't just cold. They were empty, like a house with the shutters drawn against the world. And for the first time, she wondered what it would take to open them. Weeks turned into a month. Spring began to fight its way through the winter snows, the mud season taking hold. The days settled into a grueling rhythm. Elara rose at 4 a.m. to stoke the fires, a dirty, sooty job that left her coughing. She scrubbed floors until her knees were bruised, churned butter until her arms ached, and laundered the heavy linens in boiling vats of lye soap that stung her hands red. The work was hard, harder than at home, because the standards here were so high. Every surface had to gleam. Every shirt had to be starched to perfection. But amidst the drudgery, she found a sanctuary. Every day at mid-morning, while Silas was out overseeing the cattle or meeting with traders, Elara was tasked with dusting the library. It was a magnificent room, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. There were histories of Rome, scientific treatises on botany, and novels by Dickens and Cooper. It was a treasure trove she could only dream of. One morning, while dusting the high shelves, she found a volume of poetry by Walt Whitman, the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass. She opened it, intending to read just a line. "I have loved many women and men, but I love none better than you." The words gripped her. She sat down on the floor, the feather duster forgotten in her lap, and began to read. She was transported away from her debt, away from the cold mountain, into a world of feeling and light. The poem spoke of connection, of a soul reaching out to another. She didn't hear the heavy oak door creak open. "Is that how you clean the floors? By sitting on them?" Elara gasped, scrambling to her feet. The book tumbled from her lap, landing with a thud. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway, his frame filling the light. He looked furious, his boots muddy from the yard. I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne." She snatched up the book, clutching it to her chest. I've never seen so many books." "I didn't mean to—" "Give it to me," he said, holding out a rough, calloused hand. She handed him the book, bracing for a dismissal. He looked at the title, then back at her. His expression shifted from anger to something else. Curiosity? Or perhaps a memory. "Whitman," he muttered. "You like poetry?" I don't know, sir. I've never had access to it. But it's beautiful. It sounds like music." Silas studied her face. He saw the genuine hunger in her eyes, not for food, but for something his money couldn't buy. He saw a kindred spirit, stifled by circumstance. "My wife loved this book," he said, his voice dropping to a rasp. He handed it back to her. "You may read it, but only after your work is done, and wash your hands first. I won't have grease on the pages." Elara stared at him, stunned. "Thank you, sir." "And Elara?" "Yes, sir?" "The room. It feels less dead when someone is reading in it." He turned and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar. From that day on, the library became their neutral ground. Silas began leaving books out on the desk for her, Great Expectations, volumes on local wildflowers. In the evenings, instead of retreating immediately to his room, he would sit in the armchair by the fire while she tidied up. He would ask her opinion on a chapter, and she would answer, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. They debated the merits of Cooper's The Last of the Mohicans and the Tragedies of Hugo. One rainy afternoon in May, Elara was polishing the grand piano in the parlor. It hadn't been played in years. Elias had told her Silas couldn't bear the sound. But as she wiped the keys with beeswax, she unconsciously hummed a tune her mother used to sing. "Hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary." She sang softly, her voice clear and sweet, filling the empty, dusty room. When she finished the verse, she turned to see Silas standing there. He wasn't angry. He looked shattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you don't like noise." "That isn't noise," he said softly. He walked to the piano and ran a finger over the keys she had just polished. "Rebecca used to play that. I thought if I heard it again it would kill me." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw not a servant, but a woman who had brought warmth back into his cold hell. "But it didn't kill me," he said almost to himself. "It reminded me that I'm still alive." That night, he stayed in the parlor while she worked on her mending. He didn't read. He just watched the fire, and occasionally he watched her. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was companionable. A fragile bridge was building, stone by stone, over the chasm of grief and class that separated them. By midsummer, the transformation of Stone Ridge was undeniable. Elara had taken charge of the garden, reclaiming it from the wild. She planted beds of Rocky Mountain columbine and mountain jasmine, their fragrance filling the evening air. She had opened the curtains, letting the harsh, bright Colorado sun wash over the faded rugs, chasing away the shadows of the past. And Silas had changed too. He shaved daily now. He ate dinner with Elara, at first under the pretense of discussing household accounts, but soon they were talking about everything. He told her about his youth in the fur trade, the silence of the high peaks, the way the stars looked different when you were alone. One evening in late July, the air thick with the scent of pine and coming rain, Silas called her into his study. He moved to a bookshelf and pulled a specific volume on botany. With a click, A hidden panel in the wall slid open. Elara gasped. A secret room? My refuge, Silas said, holding a lantern. Come. He led her into a small, cozy space filled with maps, scientific instruments, and a small fireplace. It was intimate, a place where the master of the house could shed his armor. On the desk lay a collection of rare geological specimens and sketches of local birds. Why show me this? Elara asked, her breath catching in her throat. The space was small. She was standing very close to him. She could smell the tobacco and pine scent of his coat, the faint aroma of the bay rum he used after shaving. Because, Silas said, his voice rough with emotion, turning to face her, I have no secrets from you anymore. Elara, you walked into this house of ghosts and you chased them away. You saved me. He reached out, his rough hand cupping her cheek. The touch was electric, shocking them both. Elara leaned into it, her eyes fluttering shut. It was a violation of every rule, every boundary of their world. Silas, she whispered, using his given name for the first time. This isn't right. I am your servant. You are, I am a man, he interrupted fiercely. And you are the woman who woke me up. He kissed her then. It wasn't the tentative kiss of a boy. It was the desperate, hungry kiss of a man who had been starving for years. Elara wrapped her arms around his neck, forgetting her debt, forgetting her station. In that hidden room, the world outside, the judgment, the class lines, the contract, ceased to exist. I love you, he murmured against her hair. God help me, Elara, I love you. And I love you, she replied, terrified and elated. But what can we do? The town, your position, Judge Sterling. He pulled back, his face hardening with determination. I don't care about the town. I don't care about my position. I only care about this, about us. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. In the 1860s, a man of Silas's standing marrying his indentured servant would be social suicide. She would be branded a gold digger, a calico queen reaching above her station. He would be ostracized by the cattle barons and bankers he relied on for business credits. We have to be careful, Elara warned. Judge Sterling, he's been watching us. He wants you to marry his daughter Elizabeth. He views you as a business merger. Sterling is a fool, Silas growled. But you're right. We must be discreet. Until I can figure out a way to free you from the contract legally and properly. For a few weeks they lived in a blissful, terrifying bubble. Stolen glances across the dinner table. Secret meetings in the garden under the guise of pruning roses. Elias Moon saw it, of course. He said nothing, but his eyes held a knowing, approving glint. He would nod at Elara with a new respect. One afternoon, Silas brought her a gift, not a trinket, but a bolt of emerald green silk. For a dress, he said, for when we can stop hiding. Elara touched the fabric, tears in her eyes. It was the color of the deep forest, the color of life. But even as she planned the cut of the dress, a shadow loomed. The annual Founders' Day picnic was approaching, and with it, the inevitable collision of their private world with the public one. The blow came in August. Judge Percival Sterling arrived for a business inspection, accompanied by his daughter, Elizabeth, a woman who wore her silk dresses like armor and looked at Elara as if she were something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Dinner was excruciating. Elara served the roast venison while Elizabeth prattled on about her finishing school in Boston, the latest fashions from Godey's Ladies' Book, and the savagery of the frontier. Really, Silas, Elizabeth said, sipping her wine. It's tragic how you live. No proper society. And the help? She gestured vaguely at Elara with her fork. So rustic. You really must get a properly trained staff if you intend to entertain. A man of your station shouldn't be served by a farm girl. Silas gripped his wineglass so hard Elara thought it might shatter. Miss Vance manages this household better than any trained staff I've ever known, he said icily. She is intelligent and capable. The judge cleared his throat, sensing the tension. Actually, Silas, that's what I wanted to discuss. People are talking. A widower, living alone with a young, unmarried girl. It's unseemly. It affects your credit rating, your standing. If you want the bank to finance that new irrigation canal, you need to present a stable, respectable front. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Marry Elizabeth. Send the girl away. I'll even pay off her family's debt myself. It's the only logical move. You unite our lands, you secure your loan, and you end the gossip. Elara, standing by the sideboard, felt her knees buckle. She fled the room before she could drop the serving platter, rushing to the kitchen to gasp for air. Later that night, Silas found her in the kitchen. She was packing her small bag. "What are you doing?" he demanded, blocking the door. "Saving you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You heard him. If you keep me, you lose your standing. You lose your credit. You lose everything you worked for. I won't be the anchor that drags you down." "I don't care," Silas shouted, startling her. "You will," Elara cried back. "In a year or 5, you'll resent me. You'll hate me for ruining you." "I won't let that happen. I'm going to my aunt in Denver. I'll work off the debt there." "Please, Silas, let me go." She handed him a letter she had written. Silas took the letter, tore it in half, and threw it into the stove. "No," he said calmly. "Silas, you think I care about the bank? About Sterling's opinion?" He grabbed her shoulders. "Elara, look at me. Before you came, I was a dead man walking. I had money, land, and respect, and I was hollow. You filled me. If I choose the money over you, I lose the only thing that matters. But the scandal? They'll destroy us." "Let them talk," Silas said. "Let them gossip. I'll build a wall around this mountain so high they'll never see over it. But I am not letting you walk out that door. You are not a servant to me. You are my equal." "Then what do we do?" she asked, trembling. "We fight," he said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Tomorrow is the Founders' Day picnic in town. Everyone will be there. The judge, the bankers, my neighbors. You want to go?" Elara asked, horrified. "I want to go," Silas smiled. "And I want you on my arm. Not as my servant, as my future wife. Wear the green silk." The Founders' Day picnic was the social event of the year for the Bear Creek settlement. The town square was filled with wagons, musicians playing fiddles and tables laden with pies. Judge Sterling held court near the gazebo, flanked by Elizabeth, looking smug and assured of his victory. When Silas Thorne's carriage arrived, the chatter stopped. It was a shiny black phaeton, polished to a mirror shine. Silas stepped down, looking more imposing than ever in a black frock coat and a silk vest. He turned and offered his hand to the person inside. Elara stepped out. She wasn't wearing her maid's uniform. She was wearing the dress of deep emerald silk, fashioned in the latest style with a modest hoop. It brought out the fire in her hair and the defiance in her eyes. She looked terrified, but she held her head high, gripping Silas's arm. Silas tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and walked her, straight through the silent crowd, directly to Judge Sterling. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Silas!" the judge sputtered, his face turning a mottled red. "What is the meaning of this? You bring your servant to a social gathering?" "This is highly irregular." "I bring my fiancée," Silas announced, his voice booming across the square so that every gossip, every rancher, and every banker could hear. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Elizabeth dropped her parasol. "This is madness," the judge hissed. "She is a bonded servant." "A pauper! She is nothing!" "She is the woman who saved my life," Silas said firmly. "And as of this morning, her debt is canceled. I have deeded her family's land back to them free and clear. She is a free woman, and she has chosen to be my wife. If any man here has an objection to the Lady of Stone Ridge, let him speak to me now." He placed his hand on the revolver at his hip, not as a threat, but as a reminder of who exactly they were dealing with. Silas Thorne, the mountain man who had survived blizzards, bears, and wars. He was not a man to be trifled with. The silence stretched. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Elias Moon, standing by the horses, started to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Then the local doctor joined in. Then the baker's wife, who had always liked Elara. One by one, the townspeople, tired of the judge's tyranny and moved by the sheer audacity of the love before them, began to applaud. Elara looked up at Silas, tears shining in her eyes. "You crazy old bear," she whispered. "I told you," he winked. "I'm a man of my word, or in this case, a man of my heart." They were married in the small chapel on the ridge as the first snows of autumn began to fall. Elara's parents were there, shamed but grateful, and slowly earning their daughter's forgiveness. The scandal didn't destroy Silas. In fact, the legend of the maid and the mountain man became a favorite story in the territory, a testament to the idea that on the frontier, a person's worth wasn't determined by their bank account but by their spirit. Elara turned the house at Stone Ridge into a home filled with music, books, and eventually children. She never stopped reading poetry, and Silas never stopped listening. And every year on the anniversary of the day she arrived, Silas would hand her a single wildflower, a mountain jasmine, and whisper, "Debt paid in full." And that, my friends, is the story of Elara and Silas, a reminder that sometimes the hardest trails lead to the most beautiful views. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a big thumbs up and share it with a friend who loves a good romance. Don't forget to subscribe to Frontier Rescue Stories for more tales from the wild West. Check out our playlist right here for more stories of frontier courage. What did you think of Silas's decision? Would you have braved the scandal? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep your fires burning bright and your hearts open. Safe travels, everyone!